Welcome to the Global Voices Project, where we talk with accessible travel professionals from around the world. I am your host, Laurent, co-founder of Tapooz Travel in California, USA. We are now approaching the end of May, and for this segment, we are going to Australia to interview our colleague and friend Julie Jones in Sydney. Julie is a creator and manager of a great travel website called HaveWheelchairWill, and she's also the editor of the fantastic magazine Travel Without Limits. Now, don't worry if you didn't catch that. We will list all this information at the end of the video. And Shannon Kelly, our amazing social media extraordinaire, will also be on the call. Enjoy.
Well, hello, Julie. Hello, Shannon. This is Laurent here in San Francisco, California. Shannon is in Chicago, Illinois. And Julie, you are in Sydney, Australia. Shannon, how about you introduce yourself? And then Julie, the floor is going to be yours.
Sure. My name is Shannon Kelly. I'm a wheelchair user, and I went on a trip with Tapooz in 2018 to Portugal. When I was in college, I also studied abroad in Australia and got to visit New Zealand as well. So I do love travel and accessible travel, and I've been doing it for a while, so I love talking about it and being involved with it. And I've been helping Tapooz with their social media for the past year. So it's great to be here with you guys.
Thank you. Julie, how are you?
Hi, I'm Julie and I'm in Sydney, Australia on a beautiful sunny day today actually. And my background is I used to work as a travel consultant in a specialist travel company here in Sydney. And when my son was born, we found out at about 5 months of age that he was actually born with cerebral palsy, which means he needs help with all of his daily living needs. He's a wheelchair user, and my focus obviously shifted to doing therapy with him. But over time, we really wanted to travel as a family, and there was a real lack of information. There was a lack of imagery that made me feel a part of society, basically. So I started when we actually won a trip to Disneyland back in 2011 and traveled as a family. And being a travel consultant, I researched every tiny detail to ensure it was a smooth trip for us, and it was. And it was such a liberating feeling having that travel experience and realizing that a wheelchair wasn't going to be any limitation to us traveling. We just had to adapt the way we did it and really research and plan a trip. And once we did that, it seemed like just telling friends and family about it wasn't enough. So I started a blog called HaveWheelchairWill Travel, where I started to document any of our travels we did, our day outings, because I figured if we were looking for that information, other people must be as well. But then I was still quite driven because there was still nothing in mainstream media. I really wanted to see imagery that made other people feel able to travel because they weren't all finding our blog, obviously. And so I started writing or approaching mainstream outlets to start writing about accessible tourism, which I started to do, and that was fantastic. And obviously a new career was born for me in doing that, and also just making PRs, hotels, attractions. Whenever we traveled, I sort of really would engage with them and try and tell them what made a trip for us. And I think seeing us having a good time inspired them to want to do better. So we developed really good relationships with many people in our travels. And one story in a magazine didn't seem enough. So co-founded Australia's first disability specific travel magazine called Travel Without Limits last March. And we're now coming up to organising our 4th issue of the magazine, which is really exciting.
And I would tell you, like I will tell all our listeners and viewers, that this is probably one of the most inspiring magazine that I've had the pleasure to read. Shannon, I know that you had a chance also to look at the last issue, and it's just absolutely fantastic. Beautiful pictures, great stories. I absolutely love it. Julie, I had the pleasure of meeting you. You met with myself and Aika when you were here in San Francisco not too long ago. And it seems so long ago. It seems like another world, another era. It was pre-pandemic, and look how the world has changed. Here in the US, we're still in the full blast of the pandemic. The last numbers are, it's hard to wrap your head around 1.5 million plus cases of coronavirus. over 95,000 deaths. It's just incredible. What's the situation in Australia, in your neck of the woods? How are you dealing with this?
Well, I think we were very fortunate to have seen the situation unravel in China, in Italy, and then in the US. So I think our government acted very quickly. At the time, I think people were hoping that it would be even quicker, but our stats indicate that, you know, a good job was done. So we ended up, I think we're currently at about around 7,500 people who have contracted COVID-19. Unfortunately, we've had 101 deaths, but when you compare that to the statistics around the rest of the world, that's a fairly good place to be in. The country's gone in various stages of lockdown, so it depends which state you're in as to how the lockdown has happened. So where we are, we were still free to be able to go for a walk, do different things. We weren't totally, you know, isolated in a house the whole time. But we're starting to come out of that. I think the, you know, sort of 1 or 2 cases that are emerging each day, and most of them seem to be people that have come from overseas and been isolated. So the government put into place, probably a little bit late, we probably could have had even lower statistics, but once people were returning from overseas, they had to go and quarantine in a hotel in the city for 14 days. And those hotels were actually guarded by army and police, and people literally could not leave their hotel rooms for the 14 days. So for the people in that situation, it was fairly horrific to come back from overseas and be, you know, in a hotel for that time frame. But they were provided with food and, you know, everything they needed within the hotel. And after the 14 days, if they were negative, then they could leave the hotel and go back to their homes. But I think those measures really, you know, show in our statistics. And New Zealand actually went into a much more strict quarantine period or isolation period. And their numbers, I think they've had 21 deaths and about 1,500 cases over time. So I think Australia and New Zealand definitely set themselves up for a good recovery process.
Julie, here in the US, we hear a lot about these, about some countries getting together and creating some kind of a travel bubble between those countries. We hear about Australia and New Zealand having created this travel bubble between the 2 countries. Can you tell us how that works?
Sure. Well, Australia and New Zealand have always had a very close partnership anyway, and I think because New Zealand's numbers have been quite low with COVID, around 1,500 people, and they went into a very severe lockdown, I think Australia is quite keen to create this bubble where we would be able to travel, Australian residents would be able to travel to New Zealand, and New Zealand residents would be able to travel to Australia, which is obviously very exciting for us because New Zealand has an amazing range of accessible travel experiences that we would love to take part in, and vice versa. I'm sure they'd love to come here. And there's also talk perhaps it will open up to the Pacific, so to Fiji and other island nations around us that haven't been as badly affected by COVID, but the government is definitely taking baby steps at the moment. There's nothing formally in place, but I think New Zealand's quite keen to get that happening, and it would help both our economies, or travel businesses, travel economy, to get some travel up and going again between the 2 countries, and certainly the airlines desperately need it.
Great, thank you for that. But any forecast if whether people from outside Australia and New Zealand could I fly to Australia and enjoy this travel bubble, or is that restricted to the residents of Australia and New Zealand?
At the moment, it looks like it will be restricted to the residents of Australia, but they're being very hesitant, I think, to open up our international borders at all at the moment, because obviously the US, for example, or Italy have not had a good, you know, run.
Sure. But Shannon, do you want to take the next question?
Yeah. So Julie mentioned your son is a wheelchair user, and we were just wondering how you both are going to cope with the new reality of travel and social distancing and the new cleaning standards.
Yes. So we haven't had, I think out of the US, there's been a lot more talk about what hotels and airlines are looking to do. I think Qantas came out this week with some discussions around the filtering system within the aircraft and the safety that is with that. We haven't heard that much. So I guess for us, we'll be taking control at the moment of our travel experiences and choosing experiences that we feel will help keep us in a little bit more of a bubble. So for us, we'll be looking at road tripping. We'll be looking at, instead of staying in big hotels where we're going to be confined to small lifts, where he's going to be quite low within the lift as a wheelchair user with people sort of towering above him, we'll be looking more at holiday parks or perhaps private rentals, things like that, to kind of safeguard him in the first phase of it. So on the 1st of June, our state is actually opening up travel within our state. So up until this point, we haven't been able to travel. So on the 1st of June, people will be able to travel just within our state. Some of our borders are closed between states currently. So that will open up road tripping for us, and we'll be going to places where there's sort of wide open spaces where we're not in, you know, say a city so much. And we'll take a lot of care of our own hygiene when we're traveling with him, as far as his wheelchair and, you know, places that we stay, we would probably wipe down benches with isopropyl, you know, wipes and things like that, just to ensure the cleanliness.
And
That's
I know
great.
you did an interview with the airline attendant. Do you want to talk a little bit more about what you found from that?
Yeah, so I thought if I'm concerned about travel going forward, then other people will have similar concerns about, you know, what the protocols are in the past and what, you know, professionals in their fields would suggest. And so I did an interview with a flight attendant, a hotel cleaner, a couple of nurses and a chef, just to ask them what would they suggest that people do. So the airline attendant had some really good tips regarding using disinfectant wipes to wipe down the high traffic areas on the plane, because I think what we all have to realize is the reality of travel in general. Hotels, airlines, they all have a very limited time frame to clean an aircraft or a hotel room. So hotel cleaners said they have 30 minutes to clean a room. It depends on the cleanliness of the room when they arrive as to how quickly they can clean it. And with a flight, you know, the flights have a turnaround time. They're very quick turnaround times because time on the ground is money. So she suggested cleaning down things like the seatbelt with alcoholic wipes, the entertainment systems, all those high touch areas, even the air vents that you, you know, reach up to twist, all those sorts of things, to always make sure you wear shoes on the aircraft and not to walk around in socks. When you use the bathroom facilities, make sure that you use, you know, the hand towel to open the door. When you leave the bathroom after you've washed your hands, when you get back to your seat, use disinfectant. I would add to that, I went to China a couple of years ago, and I was very conscious of the fact that, you know, I needed to keep well, and therefore hygiene was key. So whenever I used the buffet, for example, on the cruise that I was on, I'd use the utensils like everyone else would, but when I sat back down to my seat before I started eating my breakfast, I'd use disinfectant, hand sanitizer, sorry, on my hands, because all those people are touching that cutlery, you know. And I think since COVID, we're all the more sensitive to those touch points. So I just think it's really wise to take control of your own travel hygiene, really.
No, absolutely. You know, I segue from that, the point that Shannon was raising, and I did read the article in the on your blog, which is, it's a great article, and you know, here it's even difficult for us to go and find alcohol swipes, you know, or alcohol, or rubbing alcohol at any drugstore. I mean, there is a shortage of even the most basic item that will make basic hygiene. You know, we talk a lot, and Shannon definitely jump in the discussion about the fact that a wheelchair is really an extension of somebody's body, and it's the issue in the best of time of airport employees, or just about anybody touching your wheelchair, but wanting to help, not out of malice, but want, you know, touching, and how do you deal with something like that when you know that each touch could actually carry some disease?
Shannon, did you want to answer or will I answer?
I mean, it's definitely something that I think we've all thought about before, but even more so now. People say to wash your hands, and washing your hands with antibacterial soap definitely gets rid of the coronavirus. But if I'm just right away touching my wheels again and it's been exposed, then it's not really the point. Or what's the point of doing that? So I think it's definitely a cause for concern. And I know a lot of wheelchair users also have secondary health conditions, which make them more vulnerable to the virus. So I have been wiping down my wheelchair with like Clorox wipes and antibacterial wipes a couple times a week just to be safe. But you never know who touches your chair or what it gets exposed to. So it's definitely a cause for concern.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think it's more a cause of, I think it's a cause for concern for everyone. I'm certainly very conscious of the fact that my son isn't always independent in his wheelchair. So although he is an independent wheelchair user, there are times when support workers will push him for long distances, for example. So I would also hasten that if you're in that position, it's good to provide the tools for support workers or anyone else that is assisting you to have them on hand. So we have a pocket in the back. We have a lot of built-in storage into our son's manual wheelchair for travel, and that has really helped us at this time because we're able to have hand sanitizer, we're able to have wipes in those pockets that we've built in for travel. And I think it's really important to remember which one of the nurses I interviewed commented on that hand sanitizer is only good for 7 to 8 times, and then after that you build up a residue, which means it's actually not helping you I guess reject things like the virus. So it's important to do hand washing in between those times. So if you're traveling in particular, it is important to go to a washroom or use a bathroom to actually wash your hands in between those times. And I think with your wheelchair, if you can do once a week hot soapy water, that's a really good way to keep it clean. And we take a lot of the items off our son's wheelchair when we travel. So we've always done that. We've always taken his seat cushion. We've always taken off his, what do you call them, arm guards or armrests. Anything that can be removed, we remove. So that sort of sanitizes those parts of it. And I guess it doesn't take much when baggage handlers bring it back to just quickly wipe down. If you've got a wipe at the ready, wipe down the handlebars and the seat belt, because they're probably the areas that they most likely will have touched. But I think it will be like everything with accessible travel. It will require planning and research and just,
Of course,
you know, spending that extra bit of time doing things. But I do think that there are some areas that are going to be much more likely to be dangerous. And in the early days when we're emerging from COVID, I think that's probably harder than the lockdown period, because you feel so nervous that you're now being given these new freedoms and you are thinking about traveling again and things like that. And I think it will be really important to choose places where you have more control over over your health and hygiene.
definitely. I mean, I just to as a segue to the point you just made, there are discussions not only in the US but all over the world about reopening the economy, reopening the country, and each region kind of defines for themselves the milestones of when people are going to feel safe to travel again. You know, and it's all over the spectrum. What would be your personal milestones? Where you know, what are the milestones of Julie Jones in terms of now it's safe for me to travel with my son and my family across Australia and New Zealand? What are you looking for in terms of this reassurance that it is safe to travel?
I think the thing that we've been looking for is a second wave. Is there going to be a second wave once everyone starts emerging? Because our restaurants have just started opening up only with 10 people allowed in a restaurant at a time. We've got a 4 square metre rule, so you can only have a certain number of people per 4 square metres in Australia. So I guess I'm just waiting to see if there's a second wave. School has just started going back here. So we're waiting to see once there's sort of that more people on public transport, is there going to be a spread? And then if there isn't, then I think we're pretty ready to embrace doing cautious travel. Just because I think you have to live. Like, I think it's, you know, you can stay in lockdown. Certainly if you have a really severe condition that makes you incredibly vulnerable, then I understand staying in lockdown for a lot longer. And I think it is very much a personal choice where you feel comfortable. But that's where we would feel comfortable if there is no second wave in Australia, or if the second wave is sort of controlled, then we would start to do cautious travel.
I see. Shannon, did you want to jump in?
For when I would feel safe to travel, or for
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's interesting to see the difference between how we, what we consider to be our safety milestone, and other people in other parts of the world. Go ahead.
Yeah. So in June, actually, the middle of June, me and my family are scheduled to go up to Michigan to a very rural place where we would only be interacting with a few family members, and we would stock up at the grocery store maybe one time, and it just I've actually never been there before, but it's just kind of a lake, and they have a house on the lake, and there's no one else there, so it will be very secluded, and we will be with maybe the same 5 people the entire week that we're there. So I'm confident in going there, knowing that we'll be safe, just because we know the person that owns the house, and we know who's going to be there, and we're only going to be around a select number of people, and we're driving, so we don't have to worry about flying anywhere. So I think doing road trips to kind of remote areas like that are going to be the first step for people. And that's obviously almost a month till we go. So I hope that we make more progress by that time, that everyone feels confident and safe in taking that trip. But I won't be going anywhere to a big city or flying anytime soon, that's for sure.
I totally agree with you. And can I come, to your No, but Shannon makes an excellent point, Julie, and I'm trying to see if this is something also kind of a trend that we're starting to see, a strong trend actually. We're starting to see here in the US. Being in the travel business, we're starting to see requests, inquiries about road trip. Open nature, open spaces, landscapes. When are the national parks reopening? When are the states park reopening? I think we're starting to see that people, for the foreseen future, once we reopen, maybe, the family location 2 weeks in New York, not going to happen, not for some time. But a road trip, 10 days, 2 weeks of a road trip, or in the south end of the US, or maybe even on the East Coast, when you have an increased measure of control about your environment, who you interact with, where do you go, where do you spend the night, and where do you take a walk, and family vacations. Again, Disney may or may not be open. All the theme parks in Orlando may or may not be open, but there are so many other places that a family could go in a safe and controlled manner. We're starting to see that trend here. Is there something that you experience also in Australia? Family vacation geared more towards road trips and open spaces?
For sure, and we're very fortunate in Australia because it's always been quite popular here to do what we call a lap around Australia, which is a fairly big thing, but it's usually been grey nomads, as we call them here, the older generation who retire, and then they might get their caravan or RV or some kind of way of traveling around Australia. But I think definitely we're going to see more and more people choosing to do that. And we've got so many options here. We're really fortunate. And the other thing is, here we had the bushfires, or wildfires as you call them, here over the December, or really from October through to January, which absolutely decimated a lot of the tourism business in Australia, where people would normally go and spend their holiday or vacation, in a destination, beachside location. That couldn't happen. We couldn't travel because of the bushfires. So it will be a really nice turnaround for the travel economy to have Australians travelling within the country. And there are so many amazing options, from beach holidays where beach wheelchairs are provided. We've got national parks where we have trail riders. I'm not sure if you know what a trail rider is, but it's somebody who's less able or mobility restricted can sit on something that has a wheel underneath, and you have a Sherpa at the back and a Sherpa at the front that can then take it on hikes. Yeah. So, you know, we have so many amazing experiences that are open to people. It's a really great excuse to explore our own backyard. And I mean, I think it will be a fantastic destination for people once the international borders do open up. As far as the safety of somebody traveling to Australia from overseas, you know, it's with the numbers that we have at the moment, I think it's a really good option for people.
But kind of a general assessment, Julie, of the accessibility of your equivalent to national parks or state parks, or are they accessible to people in wheelchairs as a rule?
Yes, I would say that there are some that do it better than others, and we don't have the ADA compliance here. So I would say that there is a differentiation, and therefore research and planning is definitely part of it. You can't necessarily do everything, but we have some amazing destinations where you can be included in everything, which is fantastic. And Shannon, you've been here, so I guess you got to experience some of that when you were here.
Yeah, I love Sydney. I'm so jealous. I wish I was there right now. I was studying in Melbourne, and I actually made the trip to Sydney twice because I loved it so much. So I would definitely recommend a trip over for anyone who's interested once it's safe to do so.
Well, the moment we have requests from the US, you know, we work with literally all from people from all over the world, and actually quite a number of Australians came to the US and went to Portugal. But I definitely want to look at sending people your way, Julie. In terms of road trips, can you hire an accessible minivan for a family vacation in Australia easily?
Minivans are tricky. We've got a company now who's actually started like camper vanning, which is wheelchair accessible camper vanning, which is fantastic.
I love it. Oh my God.
I know. I hope they do really, really well. They're a fairly new business, started up, I think, last year. But they're called Wheelie Campers, and they're doing a great job of promoting accessible tourism, plus really joining up with others who do accessible experiences, so making it a holistic approach to accessible tourism, which is fantastic. And we've also got some really good specific facilities here. So we've got a couple of facilities that have been set up. One is for spinal cord injury patients or people who have recovered from spinal cord injury, and it's a 5-star hotel in Sydney right on the beach. But what they offer is a whole lot of accessible power wheelchairs, because they're not common here on the beach, bike riding, all different facilities. There's another one that's just opened up in Cairns, Australia, which is on the Great Barrier Reef, and they're open to people from overseas as well, which is fantastic. So there's a combination of facilities that make it really accessible around Australia. And we've just got so much around us. I mean, I guess we've been socially distanced from the US and other parts of the world, and often it's somewhere that people don't think of coming because it's a 15-hour or 20-hour flight, but that's kind of to our benefit at the moment.
The moment you say, Laurent, come and visit me because now my country is open again, I'm on a flight, and Shannon, you're coming with us. That's it. We're coming to see you.
I'm there.
Yeah, Julie, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. We're coming to the half hour of your time that I promised not to go too much over. So thank you so much. Any last words of wisdom for our community here and all over the world?
No, I think I've said it all, really. Just planning, research, take control of your own travel, and enjoy it. I think we all have to eventually emerge from this, and hopefully accessible travel will emerge even stronger.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Julie. Shannon, any last words?
I just want to say it was great meeting you, Julie, and I looked through your magazine and it was beautiful. So I can't believe you've only been doing it for 4 editions, because it looks really polished and great.
Yeah,
that's the 3rd edition that you saw. I'm just currently working on the 4th one, which maybe you would like to make a guest appearance in, Shannon.
I would love it. I would love it. Let me know how I can help.
I'm so happy about that. And the information about the magazine and your HaveWheelchairWill blog will appear at the end of this interview in big bold letter on the presentation. So thank you again, Julie. It was an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to get together again online, maybe in a couple of weeks or so, because this is a work in progress. So thank you. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks.